what? You know, they're going to get me to get my hands on. Is everyone in?
Yeah.
Okay. You can keep the spotlight on Dr. Williams. I guess everyone can hear my voice. Let me take my mask off. I just want to welcome all of the Greenburgh Central School District families to our series on talking to children about tough conversations. As I indicated in my most recent letter to you, our country is going through yet another traumatic situation where our children have watched individuals being literally murdered right before their very eyes. They're watching people being abused. Quite recently, and most recently, we have witnessed Asian hate crimes toward our Asian brothers and sisters. And so I'm sure as our children are sitting in their classrooms and they're looking at children next to them, on the left of them, on the right of them, in front of them, behind them, there are children who look different. And they're wondering, what might this person be thinking? What might this person be feeling with all that's going on with different ethnicities and different groups, different diverse groups that are being tortured and abused? We are living in some very challenging times today. But I know that as long as school districts and parents and families and communities continue to partner, we can work together to turn this ship around. And it starts with educating our children. We are so lucky in the Greenburgh Central School District to have partnered with Dr. Teresa Taylor-Williams. Dr. Williams have been with us for the past 5 years, inspiring us, standing shoulder to shoulder with us, guiding us, and helping us to raise our children of Greenburgh Central School District together. Dr. Williams today, well, actually a couple of weeks ago, when we first heard the news of Asian hate, coupled with hearing about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many others, she said, you know, we really have to work with our Greenburgh families to make sure that they are armed with all the tools to talk to their children about race, discrimination, diversity, hate. These are tough conversations. And even as a mom, I'm engaged in conversations with my own 2 children about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, parents, families, and my friends who are here, we are so lucky to have her. And so without any further delay, I give to you our psychotherapist, Dr. Teresa Taylor-Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Chase. And I'm so happy to be here speaking to Greenburgh parents again and children that have joined. Every time I speak for Greenburgh Central School District, as I always say, I feel like I am home. I love working with the parents of Greenburgh and certainly am dedicated to the children of Greenburgh, that they have a great experience and that I can help in that journey. So as Dr. Chase said, you know, this has been one of the most challenging times for most of us of a certain age. We were hit with a pandemic. We've been hit with witnessing violence against the Capitol, you know, a place that we think is so well protected. We've watched people of color, people of Asian descent being tortured and hurt, killed because of who they are. And so for a child of any age, and I look at children from age 1 until age 25 and say that their minds are still developing. And so they are highly impacted by what we see. And so, you know, I remember the conversations that I had with my parents. Those conversations were generally about not to talk to strangers, to always know where you are and that you're with an adult, to hold my parents' hand as I crossed the street. And as I look back at those lessons and those conversations that I had, 3 generations of women and my grandfather and my father all watching me and teaching me, I don't remember them ever having to have or having a conversation with me about the topics that your children are facing, that you are facing, in order to keep your children safe, keep them aware, keep them informed, and hopefully raise a healthy young person, a future adult who will respect everyone, no matter race, no matter sexual orientation, and not hold ill will or act in violence against anyone. You know, our children are so educated at such a young age. And as a clinician, we are always in a debate about when should we start? When is the right time to expose our little babies, our little ones, to anything that's happening in this world that might be unsettling to them? And so I'm going to give you some information that might surprise you. As I teach human development and child development, I talk about when the brain forms and how it processes information, and when an infant can start to respond to stimuli. Well, research has shown that at 6 months old, an infant can tell the difference in the shape of a face, the color of a face. An infant can identify those faces that they are used to and those faces that they're not. And so even at that young age, they are discriminating. They're discriminating in who they know and who they can trust and who they don't know. I remember as a little girl, maybe I was 2 or 3 years old, and I had an aunt that would come to my house, and my mom said I would just scream and cry and did not want to go near her. But years later, I loved her, and she could never figure out why I would cry when she came. It happened to be her perfume. I would smell that scent, and it triggered something in me at such a young age. I was able to identify, but I assigned something to her. That perfume said to me that something was not right. Something was bothering me. And so if you have young ones, if you are parents of nursery children or kindergarten, even 1st through 5th grade, you may think that they are oblivious. You may think that they are not aware, but because of social media, because of how our children at such a young age have iPads, have access even to phones, they're going to get information. What we want to do is to be able to be the initiator of that information, because we want them to get their information from the right source. So as I looked at the topics that we're talking about tonight, we're talking about race, we're talking about diversity, we're talking about families, we're talking about violence, talking about fear. But most importantly, right now on the spectrum is race and the differences in treatment that people receive because of their racial identity. So if it's 6 months old, that infant can discriminate between faces, the ages that we are as adults, the ages of your older children. They are able to discriminate for many reasons. But we don't want them to discriminate. We want them to be able to see differences. We want them to be able to be accepting of them and embrace them. There's research that says at age 4, children become biased. They start to treat their classmates differently. They start to look at people and identify what they are comfortable with about them and what they are uncomfortable with about them. One of the things that they are most uncomfortable is that that person does not look like them. And at home, of what's going on around the dinner table can be the difference between your child becoming a little tiny discriminating person who has already decided that I don't like someone because they don't look like me, or a person who is able to accept that all the little children in my class or all the big kids in my high school class are all good, no matter what their race is. So how do we talk about this difficult topic? Well, when the topic of race comes up, research says that people run, not physically, but literally. We run away from those discussions. When I was involved with other professionals and I might have been at a conference or we're just killing time as we wait for a speaker to come on, people generally start talking to each other if they don't know each other. They bring up a topic, they'll bring up politics, they'll bring up choices concerning women's rights, they'll bring up race, they'll bring up religion. But I had a very wise person who said to me, don't talk about two things, Teresa. Never talk about race and never talk about politics with a stranger. And please don't talk about religion. Well, this elder, who was a mentor of mine, was very, very, very impressive to me. And I wondered why she kept urging me to be aware of those conversations. It's because those topics, what my religion is, what is my racial background, are topics that scare us. Race scares us because we're going to maybe reveal something that we did not know we felt. But when our children bring the topic of race up, we can't run. I can't pick the topics and say we can't talk about that. So we have to be encouraging. We have to be encouraging of their questions, encouraging of their thoughts, having full discussions, and not only listening, but letting them know what you share about those topics and how you feel and what experiences you've had regarding race. Were you ever discriminated against? Were you treated differently? Because that little one might be posing these questions because someone said something that was related to their race. And of course, we have to be respectful. We have to be respectful of all races. And we have to be knowledgeable because we cannot give our children incorrect information. And so what I'm saying is, just like anything that we do with our children, how did your children learn to get dressed? How did your child learn to put a shoe on? How did they know how to put an apron on and help you in the kitchen? How they know how to set the table, brush their hair, pack their school bag, anything and everything, cleanse themselves, use the facilities. It was because you taught them or they watched you. So when I bring up the topic of leading by example, that means that they are always watching everything you do. They are watching how you react to something, and they want to be like you. So it's up to you to do the right thing. When I talk to parents about having these conversations, first thing I say to them is, don't have a conversation about a topic you're not sure of, because it will come out. You have to be mindful that this child is looking to you for the answers. And what they hear from you is so important. You're their role model. You're the person that they want to be most like. So what you say will definitely have a bigger impact than anyone else. So as I pose the question of, are you considering yourself the best role model for your child? Then we need to talk about sharing our own personal experiences. Because when they hear what you've gone through, what you might have experienced that's just like something that's happening to them, you can certainly help them. So when you sit down to have these conversations, Let's not have them as one-sided conversations. Share with them what challenges you faced. What about the challenges of earlier generations that came to this country? How did they come? What were their struggles? What were the insults that they heard? How did they survive? These historical stories will establish a basis for great conversations of the strength and of the determination of your ethnic group, of how you got here, and how generations before them may have suffered, may have been challenged, but they went through those things to make it great for you right now, you little one, you middle school one, you high school one, you future college student. There were people that walked a path that now allowed you to have it a little bit easier. So I guess what I'm saying is, do you know who you are? Do you love who you are? Do you like yourself? Are you confident in your skin? Are you ready to talk about someone with great enthusiasm, some little one whose eyes are wide and waiting to hear what you have to say, and tell them why you love who you are and why they should love who they are? Talking about these histories and experiences of all different racial and cultural groups, but specifically your own, will be so life-changing for them because they'll have something to draw upon. You know, a little bit off track of race is even the impact of the pandemic and children. And many of my clients are concerned about how our children, 5, 10 years from now, how will they have been affected by the uprooting and the upheaval of their lives and the change in their lives in just an instant? What psychological effects will that have on them? And I say to them that, number one, children are resilient and they're going to be able to be strong because they have you, because they have parents who are concerned, parents who are going to see them along the way, parents who are going to be there in those 5 years, in those 10 years down the road, when you can sit together and reminisce about the good things that came out of this pandemic, of more time together. And because we've had more time together, we've had more conversations. And that's my point. You have a captive audience. You've had that captive audience for a year. Now, granted, there were times that you didn't feel like talking. You didn't feel like explaining anything to anyone. Parents have been pushed to the limit for a myriad of reasons. But we still have some time to get these conversations going. And because we're together, because you may have been sitting around the TV and watching the Capitol under siege and watching the trial now of the police officer who was involved with the death of George Floyd, of incidents of Breonna Taylor, of real critical things in front of us that are going to be life-changing. These are the things that spark great conversations. Unfortunately, we're watching these things and they just continue to come. And the news continues to hype certain things about the COVID virus, about the injection, about the vaccine, about a new breed of the virus. So we have to temper what we allow our children to see. And we don't want to inundate them with this news. And I don't want you to inundate yourself. You know, I have some friends who live alone and have since last March kept their TVs going 24/7. And now they're asking me, do you think that's had a bad effect on me? And I said, well, what did you have on TV? Well, some of them said, well, I would put comedies on, I would put a movie on. But there are many people, like my friends and my clients, who have had the news on nonstop. I'm going to ask you right now, if that's been your habit, if this is what your children has walked past the living room and seen all day long, or in the kitchen on a little TV, let's try to temper that. Let's try to reduce that, because we are coming out of this and we need to start feeling like we're having some normalcy. But back to the topic of race and racial fairness, the struggle. People will say, you know, the struggle continues. The struggle is real. And I can say for myself, the struggle does continue. The struggle is real. I wish I could say, as a person of color, that I don't have any more racial biases against me. I don't have people implying things about me because of the color of my skin, or the color of my children's skin, or the mixed race of my family. We still get comments, and I expect those comments will always come. But what you want to arm your children with is the right answer, is strength and fortitude, and most importantly, self-confidence. Because unfortunately, we can't control what other people think, or what they say, or what they do. But we certainly can control how we react. That's one of the lessons that I'm hoping that young people in your home will get and have gotten. That even though someone may be throwing rocks, not physically, but literally, and throwing rocks with racial epithets, with insults, with bullying, those rocks will never stop being thrown. But because you're a good parent, because you're going to have these conversations, because your child feels like they can say and tell you anything, you have an advantage. And when they're telling you that someone is being unkind, but I knew what to do, I knew how to react, I handled it, that has to make you feel good and your child feel good also. Now, if something goes to an extent where it's causing extreme distress, then it must be reported. And it's not for the child to handle themselves. But as we talk about race and we talk about differences, we do have to be honest all the time. But what we also have to do is to have age-appropriate talks. Age-appropriate talks about bigotry, about oppression. Because children notice differences and patterns, they notice that maybe on your block, everyone looks the same. Maybe in your community, everyone is the same color. Then where do they see their differences? Where do they see diversity? If you live in a community and you live in a neighborhood that is strictly of one race, one ethnic group, then it is your responsibility to expose them to the diversity of others, of other people. That is our responsibility as parents. If we're not doing that, then we are teaching them to be closed-minded. We are teaching them that one race is superior. We are teaching them that other races are not invited in. We're teaching them that within our community, we are just this one race, and we don't want anyone else in. That's not the lesson you want them to learn. They have to understand bias. They have to understand mistreatment. And they have to understand racial fairness. Racial fairness meaning that we are all treated the same, we all get equal opportunity, and we are not mistreated or treated differently because of how we look. But when I talk about community and I teach about community, one thing that I tried to make clear is that every community that may be isolated into one ethnic group does not mean that it's deliberate or that it's bad. Because you and I and your friends and others and family, we like being around people who are like-minded. We like being around people who we can start a joke and finish the other half. We like to being around people who we are all of the same ethnic group. The difference is we invite others into that community. It's not to the exclusion of other races. So you're a parent. And who told you that being a parent meant that at some point your job was over? Oh, when they go to school, the teacher's going to teach them all of these difficult things. The teacher in the classroom, the health ed teacher is going to talk about the tough things. They're going to teach them about sex education. They're going to learn about diversity in history class. You think you have it covered. But the teaching about these things is not exclusive within the walls of the school. That's just when they enhance it. That's when they get their formal lessons on these topics. But the lessons about race and the lessons about differences among people starts right where you are right now, in your home. And putting it on the school is like handing it over and saying, I can't talk about that. I don't know what to say about that. I don't have all the information. But you can't sit back and do that. I bet all of you who have children in sports, you're on the sidelines, you're second guessing the coach, you're yelling and screaming about a bad call. You should have that same enthusiasm and that same energy about racial unfairness, about bias and discrimination. You should be a cheerleader for equality. Doesn't that make a great person, a fair person? And that's what we're raising these little ones up to be. So what I'm saying is that you have an active role. You have an active role in teaching your children about race and about racial bias. You're a change agent, and you can be the biggest change agent in your children's lives. And then you're nurturing other change agents, other activists, other supporters, people who want to do something for others and prevent discrimination because of ethnicity. And you can connect with the conversations you have with your child. You can tell them why it's great to be involved, why it's great to be engaged. I remember my first visit to Greenberg School District, and when I walked into the high school, and there was an exhibit, and that exhibit included flags from every country. And I was amazed by that, because I said, this is a statement. This is a statement of equality. This is a statement of respect for others. This is making a statement that at Greenberg, everyone is equal. And that's what I love about being at Greenberg, because of the diversity there. But that also meant that you parents had to endorse that. You had to support that diversity statement. You had to enforce that it was okay to put every flag from every country. And I think that was even followed by meals of every country and other activities. You want to be active and not just be a bystander. Think of what I just said. When you're at your child's game, whether it's a track meet, a soccer game, baseball, you're not a bystander. You're probably loud and supportive and screaming your child's name, and don't let the coach make a bad call. You're right there as an advocate and letting them know how you feel. So being a bystander is not an option right now, because we are too involved with what's happening. Too many things are happening against people because of their race. So we cannot be a bystander. So when we have these talks, I remember sitting down at the kitchen table and whatever subject was coming up, if I had asked about going to a party and I asked about going across the street to a friend, my mother would sit me down or my grandmother would sit me down and say, look here, Teresa, you don't go to the park at 6 p.m. That's the rule. Teresa's in the house at 4, and that will always be the rule. And that was the end of that conversation. And many of you of my same generation, I know you had talks just like that. We didn't have two-way conversations in my generation when I was a child. It was a one-way conversation. One adult was telling me what I was not going to do, and I was going to accept it. And did I have any questions? And I never did. And now you can know that's the rule. And that was fine because we weren't faced with all of this that's in our face right now. All of this hate, all of this animosity, all of this violence. And so I don't want you to think that having a conversation about race is a one-time event. Okay, today's Wednesday, we're going to have a talk and we're going to all talk about race. And we have that talk. All right, I did it. I covered it. I think everybody's good. You know that can't work because we are in an ever-changing society. Things pop up, incidences happen, people fight, people do the wrong thing, people get angry, people take it out on other people wrongly. People don't educate themselves about an ethnic group. They make assumptions. That turns into racism, that turns into discrimination. So when you have these conversations, it's like a marathon. You're going to keep running it and running it and running it. And it's not going to be a sprint. At times, it's going to be really hard. At other times, maybe you'll be more equipped and answer the question immediately for your child. But what I do want to emphasize is when you have those conversations, it is always okay. As a clinician, I tell my parents, the children that I'm seeing, and they keep asking me things that, I don't know right off the top of my head. You're not supposed to. Your child should know that there are things that you know and things that you need to investigate further. So when you talk about race, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have the explanation to all of their whys or hows. You just have to say, I don't know the answer right now, but I am going to come back to you. And we're going to talk about this later. But also make sure that you do come back because they're going to remember. They're going to remember that you said this is a topic for another time. So conversations about race are going to just become normal. They're going to become comfortable. They're going to become shared. And you will feel more comfortable as you have those conversations. One of the other topics that is very popular when we look at surveys amongst questions that children ask and things that parents are uncomfortable talking about. And one of those is non-traditional families. Now, it may be or seem a little old that someone's mic is on the phone. Sorry, non-traditional families. And I don't like to put labels, but for a better word, non-traditional is what we're using this evening. And that is a topic that is so avoided by families. There was a recent survey done on your comfortability about talking about alternative lifestyles, the LGBTQIA plus community, parents that come to school of the same gender, and children have questions about that. And so that's a subject that you may have to do some research on. You may have to talk to other people about, because school is the place where your child is going to find out about all different kinds of family combinations. There are single parent families and blended families, adoptive families, gay and lesbian families. There are families that are headed up by a grandmother or grandmother and grandpa, instead of a traditional family of what we used to call traditional, of a mom and dad. But every child thinks that their family is the best family ever in the whole entire world. And that's great. That means that you have engendered in them that you are a great familiar body, that you are just bonded and you're happy and you're cohesive. That says so many positive things. But children have to be aware that there are so many other different combinations of families. And what is really the definition of family? The definition of family is a group of people who live, work, enjoy, love together under one household, no matter what the makeup is. And so we want to teach our children, when they have questions, when they come home and say, I don't understand. Johnny's parents came up today and he said, I have two moms. Or Mary's parents came up today and said, these are my two dads. There's millions now of books, of resources, all age appropriate, that you can engage and help your child understand, so that they can embrace this concept that parents are not just a male and a female, that there is no reason to ridicule or make fun of anyone because their household or their parents may not look exactly like the parents of their classmates. It's also talking to your child about, well, whose family is better? Is your family better than anyone else's family? It's whatever your own family looks like. You don't shy away from these discussions, no matter what the makeup is. Children should understand that parents are just two people who love each other and love them, who have loved each other, and maybe they've gone their separate ways. But the love for that child remains the same. It will help your child place themselves, and it will help your child to place others and say that when this is my two dads or this is my two moms, okay, and here's my mom and dad. And we all have people who love us. And that's the definition of my family. And to teach your child that no one type of family is better than any other. Just like no other race, no one race is better than one race or superior to another ethnic group. So family talks, they're uncomfortable, they can be stressful, they need to be informative. But one psychologist says that you can never, ever give too much information to your child. Am I telling you too much? Well, if it's age appropriate and it's a topic that is appropriate, then it's not too much. But like I said before, keep it so that it's a two-way conversation. Or when you get into a family talk of multiple people, that everyone is asking, everyone's contributing, everyone is engaged. Most importantly, it should be an exercise where misinformation is corrected, where assumptions about people are cleared up, where falsehoods are exposed, about what you think about someone who is not like you. It's great when people have family barbecues and family gatherings, family dinners, because the conversations become so rich and so enjoyable. And don't think that these little children should not be part of it at some point, because then they can hear good things about other people. And hopefully, when you have these family gatherings, excuse me, when you have these family gatherings, the gathering is diverse also, either by friendships or by other family members. So repeat, repeat, repeat. It's going to be an ongoing dialogue for all of these topics. And you'll have to return to these topics over the years, because as your child gets older, they're going to have other children come in and start giving them their opinions, saying, but wait, I don't feel like that. But if you're saying things are like that, then maybe I should change my opinion. So as they grow older and new stimuli comes in and new information comes in and new people come into their lives, new opinions are going to come into their lives. New points of view are going to come into their lives. And you have to be aware of that, so that nothing stays the same. You're going to always have to be involved and listening and updating and being attentive and listening to what they're saying and really hearing what they're saying. Unfortunately, one of the most important topics that's really pertinent for right now is all of the violence, shootings, demonstrations, protests. But what's important as we talk about these topics is to make distinctions. Somehow people have identified peaceful protests as violent, as intrusive, against the law, and not presented them in the context that they were established to be. You know, we live in this country which has freedom of speech. We have freedom to gather peacefully. And I'm sure that these things and topics are going to be covered and have been covered in your child's history class. But it cannot preclude what they see in front of them on TV. People scaling a wall in one of the country's most sacred areas, Washington, D.C., where our capital is, the pinnacle of where our political buildings are. And all of a sudden, in an instant, we looked at something that appeared to be like a TV show. It could not be real. And during the week that followed, I was inundated with calls from parents on how to handle what their child had seen. My best advice was to have these conversations that I'm talking to you about right now, to point out the differences between violence and peaceful protests, witnessing shootings and people injuring each other, police officers being attacked, helpless. What did that say to a child? It said that we had to have, and we still have to have, a lot of conversations. You know, I remember the little boys in my class when I was in elementary school, and things were very traditional. And we had boxes, and we had uniforms, little mini uniforms of a fireman, a fire hat, or a yellow coat, a rain jacket. And the boys would immediately run to grab the police officer's hat. And the girls would stand around, and I'd be there too, saying, okay, I'll be a teacher, or I'll be a mom, which is great. But imagine little ones who know that they are protected and they are safe because we've taught them that if you're in trouble, get a police officer to help you. And think about how they would feel now after they watched what was happening at the Capitol with police officers being injured. We need to have these conversations because it's still lingering. You know, children hold things, they're like sponges. They don't understand that things were settled, police officers were taken care of. What remains in the forefront, the image that they keep, is the frightening image of a police officer being hurt or knocked down. We also have to have the conversation about unrest, when people feel that they are being mistreated, and what they resort to. Do they resort to making signs, holding hands, you know, in peaceful protests, maybe singing, maybe chanting? But what's the difference in that, in the violence that they saw? It is a big distinction, and we have to let them know that there is a difference in those things. So there's no one way to ever explain a tragedy with children. Each incident is individual. Each incident, each explanation is different because the circumstances is different. You have to look at the age of your child and say, what must I tell them and what must I hold back? Because they are not equipped to handle this. And before the age, when you think about their age, think about how they may struggle with the information that they're you're telling them about. You know, the American Psychological Association says that children under 8 should be shielded. Now, that's a debate because children under 8 have all different mental capacities. Some are more mature and able to understand as we explain what they're seeing in violence and protests. And some may be little ones that still can't understand exactly what's going on. So that's up to you. I cannot tell you what and when and how a child under 8 should be informed about these things. But absolutely, if they bring a question to you about it, then it must be addressed. And I mentioned this earlier. What is your true feeling? When I speak to parents and I talk to them as I'm speaking to you tonight about these topics that are so hard, these topics that are so current and prevalent, what's your feeling? What's your feeling on violence? What's your feeling on peaceful protests? How do you feel about the shootings that occurred? Are you uneasy? Are you having flashbacks to what you saw on the screen? Do you have signs of anxiety? You know, we take information in and the brain stores it. And then maybe a week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, something will trigger. And something will trigger and have a flashback to what we saw. It can still affect us. And so when you're processing your feelings and trying to figure out, how do I feel about this? How did I feel when I sat and watched people scale a fence and go into the Capitol? Or I watched, maybe you saw George Floyd on the ground with the officer's knee in his neck, begging for his life. How did I feel? Get right with your feelings before you try to explain to your child. Think about what I'm supposed to say to this child if I don't feel a certain way. Then you have to do some soul searching. Because like I said before, you are their role model. What you feel and what you say is what they will repeat and they will internalize. So you have to get right with yourself and understand how you feel about these things, and then be ready to sit down and have this conversation with your child. And as you're processing your feelings, remember, you're a parent. You're not perfect, and no one expects you to be. You can't be okay all of the time. And with all that you've been engaged in, all that you've been asked to do, I know there are parents who have had job changes, even loss of job. It's been a very, very trying time. I'm asking you tonight, how are you handling your emotions? Because you have to manage the emotions of your entire family. But how are you feeling? Do you have fears? Do you feel angry? Is sadness inside? Hopefully, you find periods of joy within those other moments. Do you feel guilty about anything? Anything? Maybe not responding to something immediately. Maybe feeling that you have not done the best job as a parent in this online education, in this change of lives that your children's leading. I encourage you to not embrace that feeling, to try not to feel guilty. Because just the fact that you're here, you signed on, you're listening to me, means that you are so interested in finding out one more thing about how you can make your child's life better. You're empathetic. You're teaching your children to be empathetic, but you're also letting them express their emotions, which is so important right now. Don't squelch their emotions. You may have to extend yourself, and I know you've learned that now in this year. You may want to hold back from yelling or saying, just don't bother me right now. Or please go occupy yourself somewhere else. Or I've had enough. This is all normal. Let me tell you, this is all normal. You've been put in a very, very abnormal situation. And so however you've dealt with it, just know that you've dealt with it to the best of your ability, and that this too will pass. Sooner than we know, things are going to be back. Every child's going to be in school. We will have our lives back again. This is a passing moment. Don't criticize yourself. Don't feel guilty. Just do your best. And your child will be aware of that. They know how hard you work for them. They know every effort that you put in. Give yourself a pat on the back for all you've done this year. And just keep communication open, you know, as you're being a role model, as you're being a good parent, as you're telling your children to be aware of cultural differences and embrace those cultural differences in other people, and embrace morality. I know that you're teaching your children right from wrong. And all of these things, all of these ingredients is going to make you the parent of a wonderful adult, because you've put every ingredient into that recipe to bring them to that point. And you'll see the results of your hard work very soon as years pass. So as I wrap up tonight, you know, I always have to say something about social and emotional wellness. I'm concerned about your child's social emotional health, just as I'm concerned about you and your social emotional health as a parent. No one told us it would be this hard, and sometimes it's really easy. Parenting is something that you learn every single day. I don't think there's a perfect formula. But when we think about the topics that we've covered tonight, race, diversity, differences in families, what we do all agree upon is that we just want our children to be happy. We just want our children to be safe. So our job is to address the hard topics, provide information, try to alleviate their fears, act as soon as you sense distress. And please, if it ever becomes overwhelming and you ever get to a point where you say, I'm just at the end of my rope, get a partner, reach out, partner with your school, partner with the social worker at the school. Dr. Chase picks her phone up in a second for everyone. And that you have assistant principals and principals that are waiting to help. And I'm sure they can give you referrals and references for mental health clinicians like myself. So I hope that I have brought some insight into these topics. It's not easy. Parenting is a challenge, but I'm sure you're doing a wonderful job. I thank you, Greenberg, and it's been a pleasure to speak with you all of these years. It's been a pleasure to be a part of these series, and I just wish you all the best. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Williams, I think we should be thanking you for sharing your expertise with us and for partnering with us and to help us to be better, more effective parents, educators, mentors to our children. This is a tough world, and they are experiencing things that we cannot even begin to fathom when we were that age. And so we're going to have to continue to provide supports for our students. We want to continue to have partnerships and other folk we can talk to and rely on to help us with this hard task of parenting. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask while we have the expertise of Dr. Teresa Taylor Williams with us. I know that she is in demand. I don't know if you all had an opportunity to see her on the Today Show for the past couple of weeks, where she has contributed expert advice, on a variety of topics. But we have an expert here, and so parents, please feel comfortable and feel free to ask her any questions. If you want to use the chat to have a private question to Dr. Williams, you may do that as well. She'll be able to see it. Just try, Mama. Anyone?
Yes, I have a question. Good afternoon. Well, let me say good evening to everyone, and thank you to Dr. Chase and the others, and to certainly the presenter for this session tonight. But I'd like to ask, how do us as parents have a candid conversation with our teenagers who we've identified to be really passionate around, Black Lives Movement? We've seen it. It's so prevalent in the news, social media, all that. And you have a child who really is passionate about it, really feels like, they need to have a voice on what's going on. How do you have that candid conversation where you do want that, or her willingness to have a voice, but also somewhat filter that so, there aren't any issues even with amongst her peers who may not be of a similar mindset or view or worldview. So how do you really, as a parent, help to channel that emotion and that passion where, yes, she's able to voice her opinion and be strong and confident in what she believes, but also somehow filter that or relegate that to not be also offensive in doing that? I hope that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Let me say a couple of things. Number one, you have a young person who is engaging. You have a young person who is watching what's happening in the world and being aware, so that she's a highly intelligent young lady. When teenagers get involved in a cause, for me, it's good, as long as the cause is positive and is trying to do something to better society and better the world. I can understand that you might be a little anxious about her being so committed to an organization or to a movement But if you think back to the civil rights movement and how people came together of all races and all ethnicities, and they focused on one thing, which was freedom, freedom for people of color like me, people of Black skin. And so with your daughter, you know, she's found a passion in something. Now, what I would encourage with you in having a conversation with her is a few things. Number one is that whenever you're engaged in any kind of movement or you're going to be part of a crowd or protest, just make sure that you're safe. Number two, when you are talking about this passion that you have, and this goes for any topic, make sure that you're in a safe space. And what I mean by that is make sure that the people that you are talking to are open-minded, just like you are. That people that want to hear about something new, people that want to hear about what she's involved in and can be supportive of her, even if they're not engaged in it themselves. And for her, she has to be able to discriminate against who she can feel comfortable talking about this with and who she cannot. And most importantly, I don't want to see that fire put out in her. There are so many ways that you can be part of a movement and not always be in the movement. And she can make flyers, she can write poetry, she can have a reading, there's so many ways, creative ways, that you can still express your commitment to a movement and not actually be there. And I would encourage her to explore those ways also. I hope I've answered the question.
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Williams, I think I have to apologize to you.
Yes.
You were not on the Today Show. You are a contributor to Good Morning America. I apologize.
That's okay. TV's TV. I go with either one.
No, I need to get your credentials right. So, because you've earned them. So Good Morning America, I apologize.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You know, I want to commend the parents who are here. I want to commend them for their courage to partake in this, ask questions, add to the chat. Roy, we see your comments. Dr. Williams, I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at Mr. Finichel's question. Please take a look at it and hope, or his comments. We just appreciate, you know, parents, just your commitment to this partnership in making sure that we are together raising healthy children who are considerate, tolerant for one another, children who are kind and respectful of differences. We again are here to answer any questions you may have. We have the expertise of Dr. Williams, so let's take advantage of it.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Finichel. Thank you. Thank you so much. I am happy to be here. I always appreciate being involved with Greenberg. I'm so sorry. Always feel wonderful to be here. Thank you. I was thinking about what you said. This is not a one-way conversation. Absolutely, Mr. Finichel. It's a ongoing conversation. Inclusion is hard. It absolutely is. And that, you know, how do we reach the people who are not here listening today? Well, I think it's the onus is on us to spread the word. You know, if you've enjoyed anything that I said today and you enjoyed this session, certainly encouraging and expressing that to Dr. Chase, but even more importantly, is to talk to other parents about what they missed. You know, I'm sure that there were parents who wanted to sign on, but you hear the topic of, number one, we're going to talk about difficult topics. And, you know, some people are not going to run toward that. They're going to run away from it. But, you know, once they hear that this was a really great discussion, I mean, the questions that parents are asking, it's no one is put on the spot, that we just can have an open dialogue and feel comfortable about it. I think that's what the best thing we can do about those parents who didn't show up. And the other unfortunate thing that maybe spreading the word can help is that this was really something that could aid you in talking to your children. And, you know, the more children that are engaged in conversations about equal access and racial equality and alternative families and the different kinds of families that exist, and how to handle violence, and when you hear about a school shooting, and these little ones come together and they can be better people to each other, you know, and we can eliminate some of the bullying and some of the ridicule that's going on, and make the classrooms happier places. I think if we could just get to the heart of that matter and just get these parents to understand that the bottom line is we're just making it better for the classroom, you know, and it's going to be a better learning environment. So thank you for that. And of course, Mr. Gaines, thank you so much. Thank you for always attending. And I'm always happy to see that you're a part of this.
Mr. Gaines is a treasure to our school district. Dr. Williams, he basically picks up the baton where you leave off with our parents. He then in turns provide this to our children and to our staff. So we're very lucky to have Mr. Gaines as part of the Greenburgh Central School District family.
Absolutely.
If there are, yeah, we're lucky. Trust me, we are. If we are, there's another one in the chat, Dr. Williams.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I try not to go off topic, but you know, as you're talking about one topic and one hot spot and one hot point, it leads to, you know, discussions on other topics. And that's what I want parents to understand, is that, you know, you may be sitting down and having a conversation and saying, okay, we're going to be talking about race tonight. And then something else comes up. And it may come up and your child is sitting there saying, well, I don't have a question about race. I understand what you're saying, but what if somebody bullies me? You know, or what if somebody makes fun of me? And those conversations just grow. So thank you. And I'm glad I was able to expand the topics also, including the pandemic.
Absolutely. And thank you. You know, as superintendent, you know, my job is to also not only educate your children and make sure that they are moving toward having a successful life, but also to work alongside my community and my parents. You guys are my partner in educating our children academically, socially, emotionally. And so, you know, having these types of conversations are important. Here's where I am sad. Unfortunately, this is Dr. Williams' last time with us because her contract runs out. I have an SEL fund, thanks to Mary O'Neill, our former assistant superintendent, who put monies aside for me for SEL. And SEL is for families and for our students. And I am hoping that I can convince Dr. Williams to come back just one more time. And hopefully parents who are on this call will help to spread the word, and we can have twice as many, 3 times as many parents to hear this important topic. You know, I believe that, you know, the world, the direction that we're moving as a society warrants continued conversation about having those courageous conversations with our children. This is not easy. I'm a mom of 2, and I know for a fact it is not easy. So I am hoping I can convince Dr. Williams. Guys, send me some positive vibes that I can convince her to at least come back to us, maybe in May for one last session. And I hope this won't be the last. What I'm also hoping is that Greenburgh Central School District will maintain a contract with Dr. Williams to continue to share with our families. She is part of the Greenburgh Central School District family. And so I hope that she'll be around for many, many years to come.
Thank you, Dr. Chase.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate you. And you helped me actually to be not only a better parent, but you've helped me to become a more thoughtful superintendent as it relates to the families I serve. So I thank you.
My pleasure.
If there are no other questions or no other comments, I think we're going to part ways this evening. And, you know, if I can convince Dr. Williams, I'm going to ask that you look for a future flyer where we can bring her back. And what I'm hoping is that we can have more two-way dialogue where you can ask questions and create a platform where, there are just questions you might want to ask. You might want to ask her questions about, how do we prevent the summer slide? That's going to be a very important topic. Maybe there might be remote learning parents on this call, reacclimating kids back to school. That's a conversation that we need to have as well. Yeah. So if you have any thoughts, if you have any questions, or if you have any topic ideas, don't hesitate to reach out to me and let me know what they are. This is one last chance to ask Dr. Williams any questions you might have.
Well, if there's a question, but thank you, Mr. Gaines. It has, thank you, Mr. Fenichel. I have to say that this has been an amazing experience, and my voice is quivering, which means it's time for me to stop talking. But I will absolutely come back at any time. I love working with the parents of Greenberg. Thank you for all the support you've given me. It's been 5 wonderful years at Greenberg, and I am always your number one on my list. I drop everything to get there when needed, and I will always be here for Greenberg as long as I am wanted. And thank you, Dr. Chase, for this wonderful opportunity that you've provided to me. And it's just been a wonderful, wonderful experience, and I hope to be able to continue it. I wish Greenberg and the parents and the children and family and students, administrators, all of the best. And you can always contact me. I hope to see you again.
Good. Guys, I think that sounds like a yes, she'll come back in May. But and that's what it sounds like to me. And I have witnesses, so I feel good about that. So we'll talk later, Dr. Williams, about how we can actualize that. Parents, have a wonderful evening. If you get out and sit in your yard or just sit outside of the house, go outside for a nice stroll, a nice walk in the community, reflect on what we heard. I will see you soon, families. Thank you all and have a pleasant evening.
Good night.